Proposition 66. Death penalty. Procedures. Initiative statute. Plain language: shorten and simplify the death penalty appeals process. What does it do? It changes the process for death penalty appeals by shortening time frames and limiting the number of petitions that can be made. In order to expedite the process, it loosens some of the laws regarding who can assist in executions and what lawyers are eligible to practice in death penalty appeals. It increases the amount of money that can be taken from inmates' wages to give to their victims. It makes it so that if Prop 66 is approved, then Prop 62 is void. In California, there are only a few ways to earn yourself a death penalty, most notably first-degree murder. Treason can also get the job done. If someone has been sentenced to death, the law allows them to appeal their death sentence. In California, all death sentences are automatically appealed to the California Supreme Court, and can even be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court if the defendant requests it. In addition to these appeals, which are called direct appeals, the defendant can also file a habeas corpus petition, which basically attempts to make the case that the trial was unfair because the defendant had an ineffective attorney, or the jury didn't have access to information to properly make the decision. Each year, California spends about $55 million on lawyers for defendants that cannot afford them, and for state attorneys that argue to uphold the death sentences in the appeals. The whole appeals process can take decades. Since 1978, 930 individuals have received death sentences. 15 have been executed, 103 died in prison before they could be executed, 64 have had their death sentences reduced by the courts, and 748 are still on death row, the majority of which are still working through the appeal system. Death row inmates are especially expensive because there are heightened security measures in place to guard them in prison. At any rate, nobody has been executed in California since 2006 due to a huge legal melee challenging California's death penalty procedures that has brought the entire system to a grinding halt. So in an effort to start things back up and make the process quicker and more efficient, Prop 66 seeks to have habeas corpus appeals be heard in trial courts rather than starting in the California Supreme Court, as is the process now, only going to the California Supreme Court on appeal if necessary. It places time limits on legal challenges to death sentences by requiring that appeals be completed within 5 years of the death sentence. This would apply to new cases as well as current cases. It also takes other steps to limit the number of appeals that can be made and the time frames in which they can be made. It seeks to reform the lawyer selection process by requiring competent representation. Attorneys who are qualified to take the most serious non-death penalty appeals and meet the qualifications of the Judicial Council would be required to accept death penalty appeals as well, thereby expanding the number of attorneys eligible to represent condemned inmates. It puts the California Supreme Court in charge of the Habeas Corpus Resource Center, eliminating the current 5-member board of directors. It allows 70% of inmates' wages to be paid toward their victims instead of the current 50%. It allows the state to house condemned inmates in any prison instead of just San Quentin State Prison for men or the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla for women. It requires that legal challenges to execution methods be resolved in 90 days, and it exempts healthcare professionals from ethics violations if they assist in executions. Fiscal impact. The fiscal impact of Prop 66 is entirely too speculative to really base anything on. In the short term, there would be increased cost as the measure shortens the timeline to resolve death penalty appeals, so there would be immediately a series of cases being jammed through the system before the new deadlines. There could also be savings from allowing condemned inmates to be housed in alternative prisons rather than single cells in San Quentin. This could save tens of millions of dollars in prison expenses, but like I said, everything here is pretty hypothetical. Before we continue, a special message just for you. Now available for the fall 2016 election, the Darryl Johnson Show Voting Aid, complete with titles and brief summaries of each proposition along with spaces for your notes and verdict for you to print out and take with you to the voting booth. It's completely free, no strings, no mailing list, no catch, just helping out the fellow man. Email the Darryl Johnson Show at gmail.com. You can write me cute little notes if you like, but to receive the guide, all you have to do is type Voting Aid in the subject line and the power is yours. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. From Yes on Prop 66. California's elected law enforcement leads, police officers, frontline prosecutors, and the families of murder victims ask you to mend, not end, California's death penalty. Prop 66 was carefully written by California's leading criminal prosecutors, the Criminal Justice League Foundation, and other top legal experts, people who know from experience what's needed. Prop 66 was written to speed up the death penalty appeal system, giving the worst of the worst killers the strongest sentence, while ensuring that no innocent person is ever executed. Prop 66 saves over $30 million of taxpayer money because heinous criminals will no longer be sitting on death row at taxpayer expense for 30 plus years, receiving meals, health care, privileges, and endless legal appeals. State appeals will be limited to 5 years. Lawyers will be assigned immediately, more lawyers will be made available, and trial courts will handle the appeals as the Supreme Court oversees the system. Death sentences are issued rarely and judiciously, and only against the very worst murderers who rape, torture, commit terrorist acts, kill police officers, or kill children. There are about 2,000 murderers in California annually. Only about 15 death penalty sentences are imposed. But when these horrible crimes occur, and a jury unanimously finds a criminal guilty and separately unanimously recommends death, the appeal should be heard within 5 years and the killer executed. From No on Prop 66. Prop 66 wastes tens of millions of taxpayer dollars. Evidence shows more than 150 innocent people have been sentenced to death, and some have been executed because of poorly written laws like this one. This measure removes important legal safeguards and could easily lead to fatal mistakes. Prop 66 is so confusing and poorly written that we don't even know all of its consequences, but we do know this. It will add more layers of government bureaucracy, causing more delays, cost taxpayers money, and increase California's risk of executing an innocent person, like in Texas, where Cameron Willingham and Carlos de Luna were executed. Experts now say they were innocent. Experts say Prop 66 will increase prison spending while schools, social services, and other priorities suffer. Increase taxpayer-funded legal defense for death row inmates, requiring the state to hire as many as 400 new taxpayer-funded attorneys. Lead to the construction of new taxpayer-funded death row facilities anywhere in California. Lead to expensive litigation by lawyers who will challenge a series of poorly written provisions. Prop 66 will limit the ability to present new evidence of innocence in court, leaving people who can't afford a good attorney vulnerable to mistakes, and clog local courts by moving death penalty cases there, forcing death penalty cases on inexperienced judges. SF Weekly stated, "Combing through the initiative's 16 pages is like looking through the first draft of an undergraduate paper. The wording is vague, unfocused, and feels tossed off." This is not the first time I've covered the death penalty debacle in California politics. Hashtag Proposition 34. It's pretty much the same drill back then, except they tried to add on a $100 million commission. And so either way, California said, no, we're not going to repeal the death sentence. We want to kill them. And now they're back again with the same deal. Okay, fine. I still have the same answer. I don't really care that much either way, but if I have to choose, I say execute. After all, we're talking about 15 cases a year, and essentially the 15 vilest murderers in California. Out of 2,000 murders each year, 15 get the death penalty after 2 unanimous verdicts. To get a death penalty here, it's not enough to just kill somebody. You have to get really weird and demented about it to get a death penalty here. If you just shoot someone, California has you covered. 5 to 10 years in prison, healthcare, heart transplants, all-you-can-eat sex changes and hormone therapy, whatever. It's only you weirdos that get death sentences. Now, like I said, I don't really feel that strongly about this while we're speaking abstractly. However, if someone raped, tortured, mutilated, and killed my fictional son or daughter or family member, then I would have an opinion. We would need to go Colonel Sanders on that individual, number 3, extra crispy. I'm not interested in a Charles Manson situation where for the rest of my life I have to watch him on TV, giving interviews, writing books, getting married, and talking about his hobbies. No, thank you. Now, this isn't a bring back the death penalty proposition. We already have it. This proposition is about making the process not be ridiculous. So if we have the death penalty, then it should work, meaning that it shouldn't take decades, and it shouldn't be so drawn out that murderers just give up and die on their own before we ever get around to it. And it shouldn't be able to be shut down by the ACLU every 6 weeks either. If you vote yes on Prop 66, you are voting to simplify and shorten the death penalty process. If you vote no on Prop 66, we will continue with a halted death penalty system unless Prop 62 passes, in which case the death penalty will be repealed entirely. The Darryl Johnson Show says yes on Prop 66.